second round of dialogues between the Venezuelan government and opposition sectors continue in Mexico. El Salvador top court rules presidents can serve 2 consecutive terms. Cuba and Venezuelan athletes obtain gold medals at Tokyo Paralympic Games. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the South. In Mexico, the second round of dialogues between the Venezuelan government and opposition sectors continue. The dialogues of today will emphasize on economic issues, which both parties have recognized as priority. The first declarations ratified that the delegations have the determination to support the process and reach agreements in favor of the interests of the Venezuelan people. The second round, which will last until Monday, has the mediation of the Norwegian government and a delegation of observers from Russia, Netherlands, Bolivia, and Turkey. The chief negotiator of the opposition delegation, Gerardo Blythe, has referred to the complicity of the process.
We are beginning a hard and complex process that requires us, hours and hours of work. But this delegation is committed to listening to all the Venezuelans who want to make contributions. And we will work hard to be able to produce early agreements, which are part of our agenda.
The Electoral Tribunal of El Salvador announced this Saturday that it will accept the recent judicial resolution that endorses the presidential re-election. The resolution of the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice will allow President Nayib Bukele to run for a second term in office. This had been forbidden until now by the Constitution. The Electoral Court emphasized that these resolutions are unappealable and a mandatory compliance. They also point out that the fact that the head of the state competes again for the office does not imply the de facto that is elected, only that people will give him among their options and may decide whether to re-elect him or choose another president. Far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro continues his attacks on Brazil's Supreme Court. Bolsonaro has issued a threat that demonstrations by his supporters, scheduled for Tuesday, will serve as an ultimatum to the Supreme Court of Judges he accuses of acting against him. President Bolsonaro's personal attacks against the Supreme Court go back some time and can, in response to the federal Supreme Court blocking some of his government's most conservative policies, launching investigations into several of his key allies, and green-lighting a probe into his COVID-19 response.
These 1 or 2 people have to learn their places, and the message from you, the Brazilian people, in the streets next Tuesday, the 7th, will be an ultimatum for these 2 people. After September the 7th, what will remain for all of us, with this giant demonstration of patriotism seen in all 4 corners of our Brazil, I doubt that those 1 or 2 who dare to defy us, defy the Constitution, disrespect the Brazilian people, will know how to return to their places.
In Bolivia, the families of the victims of the Sencata and Sacaba massacres announced that they will continue their mobilizations to demand justice for the crimes that took place in November 2019. The protesters marched on Friday, noting that the mobilization brings together all movements affected by the 2019 violence, and added that they are preparing a national census to identify all the dead, wounded, detained, and tortured during and after the coup staged against President Evo Morales. They stress they need to accelerate the judicial process to punish those responsible. Meanwhile, judges rejected a request presented by Yanine Añez's defense team for his release. The death toll after extensive flooding in northeast of the United States caused by Hurricane Ida has risen to at least 49. The states of New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Maryland, and Pennsylvania saw tornadoes, record rain, and flooding. President Joe Biden on Thursday issued emergency declarations in New York and New Jersey, allowing for federal aid. The toll was highest in New Jersey, where 25 people died in heavy rains late Wednesday and early Thursday, while 6 more are missing. A majority of the people who lost their lives drowned after their vehicles were caught in flash floods, with some dying in their submerged cars and others getting swept away after exiting into fast-moving water. In Mexico, more than 560 homes have been affected by heavy flooding in the municipality of San Pedro Tlapaque after Friday's storm. According to municipal authorities, more than 500 homes have been affected in 8 neighborhoods of Tlapaque. However, they warn that this represents barely 30% of the damage caused so far. In view of the situation, the government has set up some shelters to attend the people who cannot return to their homes. The Director of Civil Protection and Firefighters of Tlapaque informed that the evaluation of damages and analysis of needs are being maintained in order to fund the restoration of the affected streets and houses.
Here, the water came up to about 80 centimeters, but there on that side, it's about 2 meters. Some got into our house, but not a lot, because we managed to put some sandbags out, but things were really bad.
About 540,000 children in the southwest of Haiti are now facing the possible re-emergence of waterborne diseases. The United Nations Children's Fund warned on Friday. The severe conditions in the southwestern part of the country, where over 500,000 children lack access to shelter, drinking water, and hygiene facilities, are rapidly increasing the threat of respiratory infections and malaria, according to the UNICEF's representative in Haiti. The official stressed that without urgent action, even cholera, which has not been reported since February 2019, could re-emerge. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. China continues to lead the efforts to ensure COVID-19 vaccines for all nations. The Chinese Foreign Ministry explained that the vaccines produced by the Sinopharm and Sinovac companies are scheduled to be delivered by the end of October and will be distributed in developing countries, especially in Asia and Africa. China has also launched the initiative for a Belt and Road Partnership on COVID-19 vaccines cooperations with 29 countries in a move to make further progress in fair vaccine distribution worldwide. The president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, vowed to speed up the country's COVID-19 vaccination campaign among teachers in urban areas on Friday in order to facilitate a quicker return to in-person classes.
Today, joint efforts between the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, authorities and teachers, all of us are making this effort to make this once and for all. Our students could take in-person classes soon. It is not the same doing it virtually than to have contact with the children. How much we desire to be in front of our students. Still, we need to understand parents and children that first they should have the vaccine. Today we start with the teachers of the urban areas because more than 60% of teachers working in rural areas are already vaccinated.
Cuba has begun conversations with the World Health Organization on the pre-qualification process for its vaccines against COVID-19, as announced by the president of the Bio-Cuba Pharma Group, Eduardo Martinez. The scientist explains that this process follows the authorization for emergency use granted by Cuba's regulatory authorities for the 3 of the domestically made vaccines against COVID-19, Soberana 2, Abdala, and Soberana Plus. The Bio-Cuba Pharma Group, which represents the biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry of the country, has maintained exchanges with the Pan American Health Organization and WHO representatives as on the development of its treatments and vaccines against the coronavirus.
There is no disqualification. It is a whole process that takes some time. Those were the statements made by Dr. Carvajal Bozo yesterday, indicating that they are attentive to the evolution of the vaccines in Cuba and also waiting to share the information to start this process, which I repeat, takes a few weeks, if not months. We will evaluate the clinical and technical files, where there will be an exchange with the WHO and the Pan American Health Organization experts.
Patients from the University Hospital of Guadeloupe in Pointe-à-Pitre are being evacuated to mainland France to help take the pressure off hospitals struggling with the weight of COVID-19 cases. 12 patients from Guadeloupe were evacuated to mainland France on Friday to relieve the still very high hospital tension on the island. Although the number of patients admitted to the emergency unit of the Pointe-à-Pitre University Hospital is decreasing, the hospital's intensive care units are still saturated with 46 patients in intensive care. In total, 73 COVID patients are in intensive care throughout the archipelago since the start of the fourth wave. 52 medical evacuations have been carried out in order to relieve the different services, according to the regional health agency.
I feel relieved that my mother can live. She's going to be able to have real care. She's going to be able to have a chance to live, because nothing is safe here. Unfortunately, nothing is safe. They do everything they can, but nothing is certain.
Today, we are doing 2 medical evacuations per island, from the West Indies, Martinique and Guadeloupe. So that's 24 patients who are evacuated each week. That is 20% of the island's capacity. So it's a huge extraction margin. We will continue for as long as it takes, and as long as the island is still saturated. The island is still saturated in terms of ICU places. It's a device that is already planned for next week, but if it needs to continue, depending on the needs, we will continue.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry say that China is working to reach carbon neutrality in the shortest time possible.
As the world's biggest developing country, China will achieve the world's reduction in carbon emission with the highest intensity in the shortest time in history. This fully demonstrates China's responsibility as a responsible major country. The United States should shoulder its responsibilities and conduct meaningful cooperation with other developing countries in the field of climate change. We hope that the United States side will view China and China-US relationship in an objective and rational way, remove the stumbling block on China-US cooperation on climate change, and push for more results in bilateral coordination and cooperation on climate change based on the principle of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit.
The world's biggest biodiversity summit since COVID-19 opened in the French city of Marseille on Friday. French President Emmanuel Macron urged world leaders and institutions to safeguard biodiversity as they work to curb climate change.
The right for biodiversity is also an element that makes it possible to respond to the consequences of climate change and to move forward more quickly there too. These fights are essential fights not only for the good health of the planet, but for the survival of indigenous peoples, and therefore the fight for biodiversity against climate change, it is fighting for these people who, for centuries, sometimes millennia, have preserved these spaces that globalization has shaken up. And so, we can see clearly, a virtuous circle exists, and it is for a simple reason. Until now, we have also underestimated the economic impact of nature.
The German capital of Berlin hosted its annual Festival of Lights display for the 17th time. Many projections and installations feature themes such as sustainability and carbon neutrality. The festival is taking place in various Berlin neighborhoods and includes the famous Brandenburg Gate and Potsdamer Square, as well as extending to train stations, ministries, and embassies. The event runs through September 12th. Still in Germany, the thousands of people have gathered Saturday in Berlin to demonstrate against racism in support of climate action and wealth redistribution. Social organizations, including the student climate group Fridays for Future and left-wing political parties, march under the banner Inseparable. The participants say that not enough is being done to protect the planet. Right-wing radical parties are eroding the democratic system, and pluralism is in danger. The protesters' demands include healthcare investment, more workers' protections, better social housing, and global access to COVID-19 jabs.
I am here today to show that areas such as health and existential areas such as housing cannot be left to the open market because this doesn't cater for proper care, but only for the maximum profit at the cost to people like us.
That not enough is being done to protect our planet, that right-wing radical parties are eroding our democratic system, and that pluralism is in danger.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. In the US, President Biden has signed an order to release FBI documents on 9/11 attacks. Biden's decision to move on the executive order this week reportedly comes after 9/11 victims' families on Thursday asked an inspector general in the Department of Justice to investigate their claims that the FBI lied about or destroyed evidence tying Saudi Arabian officials to the team of Al-Qaeda hijackers. The executive order signed by Biden on Friday said the full record will be disclosed in batches over the coming 6 months. Protesters have rallied in front of the presidential palace in Kabul to demand that the new Taliban leadership respect women's rights. A document was distributed calling for Afghan women to be granted full rights to education and participation in the country's social and political fields. The Taliban has promised a more inclusive government than during the last rule between 1996 and 2001, but many remain skeptical. Afghan women saw limited progress during the 20-year foreign intervention and war, mostly concentrated in Kabul. The situation for women in the rest of the country remains much the same, if not worse, as they suffer the impacts of the conflict.
They must make sure women participate in their government. We know that women form a majority of the population of Afghanistan. If they are not prepared in areas like education, health, and politics, and do not have a role in these areas in our society, so the world will not recognize us. They will not hear our voice.
We continue in Afghanistan, where our collaborator Bak Jones brings us new information about the situation in the country.
There are contradictory reports from Afghanistan about the reality of the situation in the Panjshir Valley. The Taliban movement confirmed its control over several important areas of the valley, while Panjshir tribal leaders make it clear that they have managed to repel the Taliban attack and that Panjshir is still under their control, not under Taliban control. This is one of the most complex security dossiers, especially considering that the U.S. agreement with the Taliban has not been accepted by several Afghan parties, such as Panjshir leaders and other Afghan leaders who led the country, such as Amrullah Saleh, former vice president in former President Ashraf Ghani's administration, who continue to insist on fighting the Taliban, so much so that they considered them as an occupying force to be dealt with. Pakistan sent a high-level intelligence delegation to the Afghan capital, Kabul, headed by General Faiz Hamid Chowdhury, to discuss issues of major national security concern. The main theme is border security, and armed insurgent organizations such as ISIS-Daesh and Baloch rebel groups that have taken refuge in Afghanistan. The Pakistani delegation will also discuss with senior Taliban officials ways to enhance security and intelligence cooperation. This visit is believed to be the first of its kind from the Pakistani side and is of great importance to both Pakistan and Afghanistan. This coincides with an accelerated Chinese-Afghan rapprochement, especially after Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid announced that China is now considered Afghanistan's main partner, which shows that there are important agreements to be implemented soon between Afghanistan and China, which could include Afghanistan in one of China's most gigantic One Road, One Belt projects.
British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab held talks with his Pakistani counterpart in Islamabad on Friday as both sides seek to shore up their interests in Afghanistan.
These are evolving. They're nothing certain yet, but they're evolving. And we are both hoping that they evolve in the right direction, the direction of peace and stability. You want that, I want that, the region wants that, the world wants that.
I'm also pleased to announce that today we're releasing the first tranche of that extra aid money that I mentioned. We are sending up to £30 million of life-saving support to Afghanistan's neighbours, and that will include Pakistan, so that there is the money to provide the basics, the shelter, the household necessities, the sanitation for those who come across the border. The Taliban has made a series of undertakings, and some of them are positive at the level of words, but we need to test them and see that they translate into deeds. Can't do that unless we have at least some channel of dialogue.
Meanwhile, the European Union announced it will engage with the Taliban on an operational basis in Kabul in order to oversee evacuations. European Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said on Friday that Taliban
What is clear
form an
is the
inclusive
future
representative
of
government
Afghanistan
in
remains
Afghanistan,
a key
allow
issue
free access to
for us.
humanitarian aid, and also allow foreign nationals and Afghans at risk to leave the Central Asian country. A delegation from the government of Lebanon arrived in Syria on Saturday to agree on the details of an agreement for the import of electric power. The Lebanese ministerial delegation is the first to arrive in Syrian territory since the beginning of the war in the country 10 years ago. The meeting is aimed at finalizing the conditions for the import of electric energy from Jordan and natural gas from Egypt through Syrian territory. The negotiations are complex due to the influence of the United States, whose unilateral sanctions against Syria condition the success of the project. Lebanon is suffering from a severe fuel shortages and frequent power outages that are paralyzing public services and commercial and industrial activities.
The two sides discussed the tough conditions that both countries face, especially when it comes to issues of electricity and gas. The Lebanese side asked if it was possible for Syria to help Lebanon by bringing Egyptian natural gas and Jordanian electricity through Syrian territory. The Syrian side welcomed this request and reassured Lebanon of the readiness of Syria to fulfill it. The two sides agreed to continue looking into the technical details.
International experts praised China for sharing technological achievements with countries along their Belt and Road, saying that improvements in the digital trade services will boost the development of many economic sectors. The remarks follow President Xi Jinping's speech at the Global Trade in Services Summit of the 2001 China International Fair for Trade Services. In his speech, Xi said that China will create more possibilities for cooperation by scaling up support for the growth of services sector in Belt and Road partners countries and by sharing China's technological achievements with the rest of the world.
How these technologies can be used to really improve the way we operate today, I think that China is going to be playing a very, very significant role in this respect. And this is going to impact on travel, it's going to impact on tourism, it's going to impact on manufacturing, it's going to impact even on exploration, whether it is mineral exploration in the ground or space exploration, because these technologies are technologies that have the capacity to be able to give us information and data that the eye cannot see, but that technology can uncover.
In other news, Latin America shows its sports potential at Tokyo's Paralympic Games with the latest gold medals obtained by Cuba and Venezuelan athletes. Cuba and Omara Duran broke the world record of the 200 meters and conquers its third gold medal after having obtained the first place in the 100 and 400 meters in athletics. Meanwhile, Venezuelan Lisbeli Vera won her second gold medal in the 200 meters category T47. With only one day to end the Tokyo's Paralympic Games, Venezuela seals its best participation in this competition with 7 medals, 3 gold, 2 silver, and 2 bronze. And with this, we come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories as always in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.